What happens when a creature is goaded and an opponent has a tax effect like ghostly prison or propaganda in play? In this video, we're going to cover the game scaffolding underlying this scenario. Let's start by looking at each of the mechanics. Goad is a keyword that applies a status to a creature. A creature that has been goaded attacks each combat if able, and attacks a player other than the controller of the permanent spell or ability that caused it to be goaded if able. Ghostly prison and propaganda-style tax effects force attacks to be paid during the declare attacker's step. If you can't pay, then you cannot declare an attacker against the player who controls them. Importantly, if you have an effect that puts something onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that player, the tax doesn't apply. You aren't declaring an attacker at them, so you don't have to pay. You're just creating something tapped and attacking. It's a small distinction, but it makes a big difference. Let's zoom back out and look at a basic scenario where player 1 has goaded each creature they don't control, and nobody has tax effects in play. This means players 2, 3, and 4 must attack each other if able. The words if able are doing a lot of work here. Suppose player 2 has a bunch of mana dorks in play that they don't want to lose in combat. Before they move to combat, they could tap their creatures for mana. The creatures are still goaded, but they cannot attack because they've been tapped. Let's run that same scenario again where player 1 has goaded everyone else's creatures, but now player 3 has a ghostly prison in play. Remember that to goad a creature means until your next turn, that creature attacks each combat if able, and attacks a player other than you if able. So when player 2's combat comes around, let's suppose they've tapped all of their mana sources and don't have any way to tap their creatures to get around goad. They have two options for their attacks. They can attack player 3 or player 4, but player 3 has a ghostly prison in play, and they don't have any mana they can use to pay. Here's the critical point. The words must attack if able never allow you to skip costs or restrictions. If you can't meet all requirements, including paying the ghostly prison tax, the creature simply isn't able to attack that player, so they must attack player 4 instead. Now what if things come down to a 1 versus 1 with goad and ghostly prison in play? Suppose I'm player 1 and I goad all creatures my opponent controls, and I also have a ghostly prison in play. If my opponent taps all of their mana sources before moving to combat, they have nothing they can use to pay the attack tax from ghostly prison. Again, goad never allows you to skip paying costs and restrictions, so in this case, their creatures are still goaded but are not able to attack. Now here's a super spicy scenario we can close on. Suppose players 2, 3, and 4 all goad one of player 1's creatures. What happens when player 1's combat comes around? Player 1's creature now has several requirements it's trying to satisfy. It attacks each combat if able. It attacks a player other than player 2 if able. It attacks a player other than 3 if able. And it attacks a player other than player 4 if able. During declare attackers, the game tries to satisfy as many requirements as possible without breaking any restrictions. With 3 different attack a player other than lines, it's impossible to satisfy all of them at once. The only player who's other than 2, 3, and 4 is player 1, the controller, and you can't attack yourself. So player 1 must choose a legal defender that maximizes the number of requirements met. If player 1 declares the creature attacking player 2, it violates only player 2's can't attack me requirement. But it satisfies 3 and 4's, and it satisfies the attack this combat if able requirement. Attacking 3 or 4 is symmetric. The punchline of all this is that player 1 can attack any of their opponents in this situation. They just have to attack someone to satisfy the requirement of attacking. One thing I want to cover before we close is the question of planeswalkers and battles. Suppose player 1 has goaded each creature their opponents control, and player 3 controls a planeswalker. A planeswalker is not considered a player by the game, so because goad specifies that the goaded creature attacks a player if able, it can't normally attack a planeswalker or battle rather than a player. But like we saw earlier when we talked about goad not being able to skirt tax effects, if each player controls a ghostly prison and nobody can pay their taxes during combat, then their goaded creatures would still have to attack a planeswalker or battle to satisfy the must attack each combat if able clause. To sum it all up, remember that goad has 2 requirements and that you have to satisfy as many as possible. Also remember that a player is also never forced to pay a cost, like those on ghostly prison and propaganda. If a player controls a goaded creature and one of their opponents controls a ghostly prison, They are not forced to pay the tax to attack. If they don't pay, then their creature can't attack that opponent, so it doesn't matter that it must attack if able. If there are other opponents without a tax effect in play, then that creature will have to attack one of them in order to satisfy the requirements of Goad. Goad can be pretty confusing when there are multiple instances of it in play or tax effects complicating combat. But hopefully this has helped you understand what's happening at a mechanical level when you run into these scenarios. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions.